Hilchis Para Adumah Perich Chamisha Osir. Hanigea b'mei chatos shelei l'tzerich hazor bein odom ben kelim tomei. So a person that touches mei chatos and it's not l'tzerich hazor, so whether he's an odom or a kelim, either way he becomes tomei. Aber ve'eini metame begodim b'shas matzoi, the fact that he's touching mei chatos doesn't make him tomei to the madrega that he's metame begodim b'shas matzoi. We learned that there's a madrega of tumah where the person himself becomes tomei, and he becomes tummy, he's only a rishon l'tumah, and a rishon can't be metame b'godim. Masha'inkin, there are certain madregas of tumah where while you're connected to the tumah, you're also, even though you're a rishon l'tumah, but nevertheless you could be metame b'godim or other kelim b'shas, you're connected to that tumah. So I'm saying this madrega of tumah, of anigeh b'mei chatas, shalei l'tzerich hazor, at this point in time, his taka becomes tummy, but he doesn't become tummy to the extent where he's metame b'godim while he's connected. Nochamal, and negeb mechatos shalei l'tzerich hazor b'nodim min kelim tomei v've'enim metame b'godim b'shas magoy shnamar v'anegeb b'mei hanida yitma ad erev. So for being negeb b'mei hanida, you're only tomei ad erev and you're not metame b'godim. Hine l'madato shemei hanida av me'oves atumah shel teira. So mei hanida is av atumah and it's metame odom yitma ad erev. And b'tumas magoyim b'kolshu. And the din of being negeh b'me'anida is even we're dealing with a very minimalistic amount of me'anida, kolshu, but nevertheless, if you touch me'anida, you become tummy. Now, v'him hoye b'em kedei azor. If this me'anida was already not so minimal, not so little, it had kedei azor, which we'll soon learn what that is then is metamin b'mago b'masa. Then they also are metami on mount, which is kedei azor. If there's kedei azor of this me'anida, so then it's metami b'mago b'masa, not only b'maga and also b'masa. And that's the number. That's one chumrah if the me'anida is kedei azoya. And the second chumrah is v'negeh b'mishanoson shalei l'tzerach, which we're talking about over here, is metami b'godim b'shas magoy or b'shas masoy ad sheyifrish b'metamav. So there's two chumras. In other words, if you negeh me'anida, which doesn't have kedei hazoya, so first of all it's only metame b'maga, not b'masa, and secondly it's only metame the person himself, and it's not metame the begodim that he's wearing or that he's touching. Masha'inkin, if the meinida is kedei hazoya, there's enough meinida of kedei hazoya, which we'll learn that you could dip the aziv into and sprinkle on it. There's enough of that meinida, so then it's metame sai b'maga and sai b'masa. That's number one, and number two is that it's metame the person that he should be metame kelim b'shas that he's mechuber to, that he's touching to b'shas magoy b'shas masoy. Shenamar umaze me'anida yechabes b'godav. Over there it says someone that's maze me'anida should be mechabes b'godav. Now ain't medaber b'maze al hatomei. So the Ram saying it doesn't mean that a person is actually being maze al hatomei and he's being metame the tomei. At that point in time, he's becoming tomei to the extent where he's yechabes b'godav. Because in tiras hatomei, if this act of being maze al hatomei is being matayr someone that's tomei, is kal v'chem sheyeh hutar, so he's certainly a star. So Mela doesn't mean that the person that's actually being mazeh me'anida on a tomei is mechabes godav. As Piashmul lamdu shezeh shenamar b'teira umazeh me'anida li'namar elo l'shir. It doesn't mean that he's actually acting right now being mazeh me'anida on a tomei. It means it's a shear that he could be mazeh from, which means hanigeya hanoise me'anida sheyesh b'em kedei azoya shalei l'tzerich hazor. That's if a person is being mazeh me'anida, doesn't mean he's being mazeh me'anida. Because it means that he has the amount over there that he could be maza, and at that point in time he's touching it or he's being noisy it. So then it's tummy, so he becomes tummy, and also metame begodim dintei. So nachamo. So the din is that main need is metame. Now, if the main need is very minimalistic, there's no kedei azoya, so then it's metame b'maga nam and masa, and he's not metame begodim b'shas maga. Masha'inkin, if it's kedei azoya, that's umaza me'anida. There's enough me'anida to be mazon, so then esai b'negea, if there's magam meinido, he touches it, or even he's only mazit, in other words, he carried it, so then the din is that he's tamei to the extent where he's metamei also begodim b'shas hazoya, b'shas hamaga or b'shas hamasa. Now v'kamu shir hazoya, what's this shir of hazoya? Kedei sheyid bil roshi give elim shel ezi b'mayim. That he should be able to take these Roshi Gevelim, the heads of these Gevelim, of these flowers which were connected to the stalks, as we learned, and so he should be able to be Toivel at B'mayim, and there's enough to be table b'mayim and to be able to sprinkle it. So if there's enough of that mayim to be able to table it and sprinkle it, that's called kedei azoya, and then he's metame b'mago b'masa, and he's metame b'eifin kozeh, that is also metame b'godin b'shas mago masa. Now, b'mamed dvarim amurim shemichatis metamin b'zman shenoge b'mei nosum shalei l'tzerich, kedem shiyasu mitzvasam. When he was nosum shalei l'tzerich, but this main nido never really did what it was supposed to do. It was kedem shiyasu mitzvasam. Aval achash asu mitzvasam. But if this menida already did what it was supposed to do, or in other words, already matar, someone that's tummy, so even though there's leftover water, and that water lechur is like kedei azoya, leftover water on the person, the water that was sprinkled, we're not talking about the water that was sprinkled, was leftover water, is nevertheless, that water is not matami. Achash nasu mitzvasam, eino matami klal, that water is not matami ketzat. Harei shetov alas ezev, he went ahead and he dipped his ezev into the water, and then v'hizo ala adam atomi or akelim, he was maz on a person or akelim, and v'hoyu amayim shesim v'yedim mi'al atomi la'aretz, after he reached the tummy, it's falling down from the tummy onto the ground. And v'chein amayim hanitozim b'shas hazor, even that water that didn't actually reach the tummy, the water that's going on its way to the tummy, he dipped the ezev into the water, and now he sprinkled that water, and the water, not all the water reached the person, but some of it sprinkled down, and it does mishas hazor al oretz elator. So the din is also hareisen hamayim tehirim. That water is also considered that kedei mitzvasim, because lepel he made the tefillah and that mayim. He's making the hazor on the tummy, so that's also considered mayim tehirim, and therefore vanegeb and vanesim tor. That's considered the nasis mitzvasi. You know, if it actually reached the tummy, made him tor, so it's for sure. I mean, it's for sure. You know, then it's clear there was nasis mitzvasim. The chiddush is that even if it was maza, and on the way of the hazor, it touched the tor, so the din is that even though he's being negea shalei l'tzerich hazor, and he's not tummy, but nevertheless, since this is nasis mitzvasim, because it's being sprinkled on a tummy, so therefore it's not matami. Now, hit pilis or eziv lahazis al davar she'eni makabel tuma. We're talking about, normally the seder is that something has to be makabel tuma, he's matbel the eziv in order to sprinkle it. But over here, the pale, he was hit pilis or eziv, lahazis al davar she'eni makabel tuma. So then, hari hamayim hamanatven, kshedim lahazis mem, k'misha biyana, the water that's going to come out of there is still kosher lahazis mem, it didn't become puzzle. And lefichach, since they're still kosher lahazis mem, and it wasn't nasis mitzvasim, because lepel, he wasn't doing any hazor, he's dipping the ezev just to sprinkle it on someone that's not really needing sprinkling, because he's not tummy. Is lefichach mitamim tumas mechatas lefishiyosem mitzvasim she'atfila hoisa l'shem davar she'eni makabel tumas. So since this tefillah was for something that's not makabel tumah, so mele that water is still considered regular water, was not nasus mitzvasim. Memele, if you touch that water, shalei l'tzerich hazor, you're chayiv. Now the mashmois advarim is, our Mark speaks it out, that mashmois advarim is that even if he didn't really do any hazor, there was a person who went ahead and dipped the eziv in order to be able to sprinkle it on an adam atame, so that water already becomes water which is nasis mitzvasim. Because the Rambam is saying over here, the Rambam, there was no hazor. Over here he was talking about the hit pilus ezev lahazis al davar she'eni makabel tuma. So then the din is that water is still considered, is not nasis mitzvasim, and that water is matami. But if he would have been dipping it in order to sprinkle on someone that is tummy, even though there was no sprinkling, mashmois advarim, nevertheless that water is no longer makabel tuma. Halacha beis. Ein meichatus mitam esakel kedim shiyasu mitzvasam. So first of all, we said it was nasis mitzvasam, so then it's not matami. But even if it was kedim shiyasu mitzvasam, so when is meichatus mitamin only achiyu teherim? So the mechatas have to be tor, like we mentioned in the previous period, and also it has to be kshedim lazo. It has to be tor ukshedim lazo. Aval mechatas shenifsalu, of mechatas that became posel lazo, kigoin shenisar b'mayim, other waters got mixed into this mechatas. Eshishasim and behema drank from it. So male again, so there's something else. The saliva of the behema is in there. Which we learned before. So the din is imnogabam hator l'truma. If someone that was tor l'truma touches it, and obviously shalei l'tzerich hazor, so then he's nitma, then he becomes tummy, which is a special din d'rabban. And basically, since it's not So it's not royal azoya, so a person doesn't, this din of the avatuma, which a person that touches meinida becomes tame just for touching the meinida, shalei l'tzerich azoya, doesn't apply here anymore. Because lepel, it's not royal azoya. But there is a din that someone that was toyer l'truma, which means he was toivel l'tzerich truma, so the din is he's nitman, and the Mefarshim learned that the pshat is nitman, because the Mishnah says that nitman means he becomes nitma l'truma. He doesn't become tummy mamish. You know, this meinida, which was already not royal azoya, it doesn't really make a person tummy. It's just midrabanon, this extra din that you have to be toyer l'truma. So when a person touches this meinida, which is not royal azoya, because it's nifsal, he becomes toyer, he becomes tummy. He's nitma, he's tummy, legabi that he's not toyer l'truma anymore. And that then is ben shenoga b'yodav, ben shenoga b'shar gufei. Now, noga b'em odom ha-toyer l'chatos. If a person that was toyer l'chatos touched this meinida, which is not royal azoya, which is not really royal azoya, v'afilu b'yodav, is areu toyer k'mishoy. So he'll still remain tummy. So basically, the din is that meinida, which is not royal azoya, is not really that din of tumah, which is, like Laram's called it before, an avatuma. Meinida is an avatuma. It's metame odom, which touches it, shalei l'tzerich azoya. But that's only if it's royal azoya. If it's not royal azoya, it was nifsalu, because something fell into it. He says, nisar b'mayim, shasim b'heima, so it's not royal azoya, so it doesn't have that din of meinida, which is metame a person. But on the other end, if a person that was royal, l'truma, and he touches it, it is metame. Halacha gimel, meichatos shenitmu. Now this meichatos became tummy. And then the noga b'em acher shenitmu odom hatorah l'truma. Someone that was torah l'truma touches it. Ben biyodov, ben begufe is nitma. So again, so this person becomes tummy. Again, he becomes tummy l'truma. So that, again, the same din. Just like we learned before, that someone that was torah l'truma, if he was noga in mayim which weren't roy, ben shenoga b'yodov, ben b'shar gufe, so he becomes tummy l'truma. So al derech zeh, this meichatos, which were nitmu, even though they're no longer royal azoya, but if this person that was Torah l'truma touches it, ben biyod ben begufei, so then he becomes nitma. Now noga ben biyod v'im noga b'hem Torah l'chatos biyodov. Someone that was Torah l'chatos touched it biyodov. So here is nitma. That's the chiddush by meichatos shenitmu as opposed to meichatos shenifsalu. Before we spoke about meichatos shenifsalu, so someone that's a Torah l'chatos, it doesn't affect him at all. Mashenkin over here, when we're talking about meichatos shenitmu, so then it's nitma, because the reason is because since it was nitmu, so mele there's a din of tfilas yadayim. When he touches it, he has to be tevel yodav, and we learned legabi chatos. If someone has to be tevel yodav, he has to be tevel kol gufe. So he has a din of tuma. So therefore, when we're talking about mechatos shenifsalu, so then it's not going to be metami yodav. And since it's not metami yodav, so mele there was no din at all. And therefore he's Torah mamish. Masha'inkim mechatos nifsalu. So if he touches it b'shar gufei, so again he's Torah. Masha'inkim if he touches it b'yodav, so since legabi yodav it's tummy, so his yodav become tummy. It's their tummy lechatos. So mele his yodav become tummy. Once his yodav become tummy, so then there's a din that he has to be table completely. That's the difference between nitmu and nifsalu. Nachama mechatos nitmu. V'nogim b'machash nitmu odem haTorah l'truma ben b'yodav ben b'gufei. So the din is he's nitma, like the din of mechatos nifsalu. However, the noga b'mator lechatos biyodov is nitma. Noga b'shar gufei harei utor k'meshoy. That's his din. Halacha dalet. Mei chatos shenoflu l'techon mei mayon, or mei mikvah, or mei peres. So the din is imroiv mei chatos is metamen b'masa. So this is a new din. So even though again this mei chatos is not really roy lahazoya because it was noflu l'techon mei mayon mei mikvah. But legabi, this aspect, actually, the legabi masa, as long as the roiv was mechatos, so it's metame b'masa. Before we were learning about memaga. Memaga, it's not metame at all. It's not metame at all. It's only metame b'maga, someone that was torah l'truma. So it's metame that he becomes uis torah l'truma. Over here we're saying that he becomes mamish tameh. This is all on a drabonadik level. On a nateradik level, he's not tameh at all because it's mechatos, which is not roy lazoya. But over here, on the drabonatic level, since it's the pale rave is mechatos, so it's metame b'masa. Nachamol mechatos shenaflu l'techon mei mayon mei mikvei mei peres. Im rave mechatos is metame b'masa. Im Reiv Meiperes, but if most of it is Meiperes, so then it's in Matame, it's not Matame at all. And Mechzel Amachz, it's again Matame, it's Matame b'masa. But again, that din is a din d'Rabbanan. Now, Efer Para, Shenis Arev be'Efer Mikla. You have the Efer Para that was mixed with Efer Mikla, and now the Kiddush Bekulam, you went ahead, you were Mekadosh Bekulam, so Mimela, in this Kiddush, there's definitely Efer Para. As I say, Im Hoya Haroiv Efer Para, if most of it was Efer Para, so it still had a din of Efer Para, so therefore the din is Matami B'nei Nida. It has a din, it's Matami al din Nida. However, Im Hoya Haroiv Efer Mikla, if most of it was Efer Mikla, so then the din is Ein Matami B'maga. If you touch this Mayim, you're not Tomei. Mashe'en can have a Matami B'masa. They're also Matami B'masa. So that's also a din d'Rabbanan. This din that they're Matami B'masa, when the Reiv was Efer Mikla, is also only a din d'Rabbanan. It says, Minat Teira, since it was Reiv Efer Mikla, so a Mela it's bottle, and therefore it doesn't really have a din of Efer Para to have a din of a Meinida. So it certainly is not going to be able to be Matayr. Mashe'en came with Rabbanan, since Lepel was Reiv Efer Mikla, so therefore the din is that it's Mitame B'masa. So B'kitzur, if the Reiv was Efer Para, so it really has a regular din of Efer Para. So therefore it's Matame B'meinida. It knows it has a din of Meinida. Masha'inkin is Matame B'mago B'masa. Masha'inkin, if the Reiv was Efer Mikla, so really since the Reiv was Efer Mikla, so it's not Mekadosh. So Minatera doesn't become Kaddish, the water. But nevertheless, Midrabanan, it's Matame B'masa. Halacha Hey. Efer Kosher, Shenosne al Gabi Hamayim She'enum Ruyim Lekachim. This water is Ein Ruyim Lekachim, and you put in it Efer Kosher. And then V'noger Behem Hatoyer L'truma, Bein B'yodav, Bein B'gufin Nitma. So again, this is not really the regular din of Mechatos. Mechatos means Mechatos, which is roy to sprinkle. This water, you're not roy to sprinkle on someone that's a tmei mess, because we're talking about what Efer that went into Mayim, which is Ein Ruyim Lekachim. But nevertheless, since Lepel there's Efer there, so it's an extra chumrah. So we say someone that's Torah L'truma, it takes him away from being Torah L'truma. And v'nogeh b'matorah L'truma ben b'yodav ben b'gufei is nitma. However, nogeh b'matorah L'chatos, afilu b'yodav, is again as a reason Turk Mishoya, just like we learned before, when again if someone touches Mayim, which is psulim already for Hazoya, and so L'gabi, someone that's Torah L'truma, he becomes Tomei, and someone that's Torah L'chatos doesn't become Tomei, just a special din that if it was Tomei, if there was a din Tum over there, so Mela by touching the Mayim, it had the din of Tum L'gabi Mein Nida. So Mela by touching it, so Mela his Mayim became Tomei, and the Mela he also needed Tefillah, like we learned. So the same thing is over here. Halacha Vav, Mechatos Shenifsalu. So the din is Lei Yigablin Betit, you shouldn't mix it with mud. Why? Shaliyasa Takol L'Acherim. Because Shem Yiga Betit V'Yitma. Now, the emphasis Mechatos Shenifsalu doesn't have the din of Tum Menatera. But on the other end, someone that's Torah L'Truma, he's Tomei. He's not allowed to eat Truma. So Mela Shema Yiga Betit, he might touch the tit V'Yitma, and it'll become Tomei L'Gabe Truma, and the Mela will go and eat Truma. Shemichatos Eina Betela Betit, the fact that the Mechatos is now mixed with mud doesn't make it bottle. Shenemer Chatos, so we learn out that Mechatos doesn't become bottle. So the fact that Mechatos become bottle, Bepastos means when the Mechatos is Mechatos, which has a regular din of Mechatos. This Mechatos is the Chposel. But nevertheless, since Midrabanan has a din that it's still Metame, it's Mechatos, so it has all these dinim that it doesn't become bottle. In other words, if it's Mamish Mechatos, which is Roy, so for sure you're not allowed to be Megabel Betit. You're not allowed to be Megabel Betit. You're not supposed to be Megabel Mechatos. It's Mayim Kadeshim. You're not supposed to be Megabel Betit. So that's not really a Chiddush. But Kimuvin, that there is a Chiddush that if you were Megabel Betit, they're not bottle and Memela, they're Royal Azor, they're still considered Metami, the Pashtus. That's the Pashtus Ladvar. Halacha Zayin. Pora Sheshasa Mechatos. Aval Pi Shenishchata B'teich Etzim V'Arba Shois Psara Tor. And we learned before that when a Pora eats something that's Tomei, so within the first 24 hours, that item is considered that it's still intact, and therefore, if you open up the Pora and that item is there, so the din is that it's Matami. Whatever that item's din had, it still has right now. Now this Mechat is Doch Matami. This Mechat is Doch Tomei. If you touch it, Shalei L'Tzeir Chazoy, it's Tomei. So now the question is the busser of the Pora become Tomei? So now we say Pora Sheshasa Mechatos is Aval Pishanishchato. Aval Pishanishchato B'teich Esrim V'Arba Shois, during the first 24 hours of after it drank, that's when it was Nishchato. So l'chura the basar, before it was nishchata, it can't be mekabel tumah. So it can only be mekabel tumah if there was nishchata. So l'chura, since it was nishchata b'teich etzem arba shoy, so it's being exposed to this mechatas. Nevertheless, it's b'sarator shenamar l'mishmeres l'meinidas. So we learn out bizman shehein shmurim. If they're shmurim, that's when einem betel. That's the not bottle. They still have a din of meinida. That meinida ain't in bottle. We said before mechatas einem betel, even if it becomes tit. Aval bizman sheshosim para, so they're no longer shmurim. So therefore, bottle shari einon shmurim. So it's only l'mishmeres l'meinida. While they're shmurim, they have a din of meinida. Masha'inka once shasa para, so it doesn't have a din of shmurim. So memela it can't be metam, even though it's still intact. We got other things that would have still a din of tumah. Halacha ches. Hamaze michalein shemazen mimenu ala rabim, v'huza olav, and then v'niklas lemigdosh, and v'achar kach nimtzu hamayim psulim. So a person went ahead, a person that was a tmei mess, and there was vices a place where there was like a chalein, where they would sprinkle from there on all the tmeim. There would be like a public place where they would be sprinkling from there on all the tmeim. And this person was sprinkled from this public chalein, and lepel later on it was nizgala, the mayim that was sprinkled on him was puzzle, and memela he was really a tmei mess, and he was nichnas l'migdash. And the din is a person that's a tmei mess, and this nichnas l'migdash is chayiv a korbanei leviyated. If depends if he was did it, and we're talking about he did it b'sheni, because he would be chayiv a korbanei leviyated. Person that was a tummy in nichnas l'migdash. So the chiddush is a potter. He's potter from a korban. Why? Because shechezkes hamayim shemazim imanu al arabim shein ksherim. So since the pashtus advarim is that they're kosher, memela b'arei zekonos, he's considered an onus. He's considered an onus by the fact that he assumed that he was Torah. In other words, he went to this place with their maza, and he assumed that they're being maza for mayim terim, and that was a normal assumption. It was an acceptable assumption. And lepel, he went, and then it was nizgala that was tummy. So the din is he's considered an honest in his potter. That's talking about if we're talking about a chalein shemazon miman al rab avalim huzol of mechalein shel yachid. It was a private place that they went ahead and they were mazar on him mechalein shel yachid, and then the nichlas lemigdosh, and then the nimtzu amayim psul. So the then is chayiv b'korban ba'elaviyated, because then he doesn't have that onus that he assumed a mayim a mazmi and al rab as a din of an onus masha'inkin from the yachid over there. If he would have been mevayer about this yachid, could be he would have found out that they're puzzle. Now this din is like a din that's sort of beer a little bit, because we know the din is l'moshel that if a woman has edim, that mezbaila, and Ben Bezin went ahead and told her she's allowed to get married, because there's edim that said that they saw mezbaila, and then it was bo horig baragla, so we know for sure that it was not mezbaila. So the din is she's chayiv achatos because of the fact that she was nivala as a eishasish b'shekik. That's called a shake. It's not called an oinus. And over here we're saying that since it's a chalein shel rabim, it's considered an oinus because b'pashtus you could rely on it. But l'chura by a woman also that had edim, and the bezdin paskin that she's allowed to get married, l'chura also you're allowed to rely on it. So why is there over there it's not considered an onus, and over here it's considered an onus? This is a dion and achrein. The pashtus advarim over there was a private thing, that there was Adam that said mezbailas, even though Al Pidin she was allowed to rely on it, but there's a musik of being baidik. Being baidik maybe more, she could have been baidik. Masha'inkat over here, this musik, we're talking about a chalein shel rabim. The chalein shel rabim, you can't really be baidik. In other words, over there, the chalein shel rabim, everybody is sprinkling, that's where everyone is becoming Torah. There's no Inyan, there's no hechatimtz of being baidik. And the chazok is that mainly there was kosher lahazis. Memela, so therefore over here it's considered unknown. So there's maybe further explanation. But the Achreinim discussed this Inyan, that on one hand was saying that even though the Chura, Bezdin Paskin, nevertheless you have to bring a Korban Chatos. And even Nachmer, you have to listen to Bezdin Paskin that a certain Chelev is mutter. So if Rav had called 8 from it, so then Bezdin brings the Korban and the Yochid doesn't. But if it wasn't, all these times, certain times, so then the Yochid has to bring the Korban, even though he was doing Al Pi Psak Din Bezdin. Bezdin Paskin that this is mutter, and L'chura that's the din. Nevertheless, the din is that he has to bring a Korban Chatas. So why over here doesn't he have to bring a Korban Chatas? Here we're saying that he's considered an onus. That needs a beer. Machlikin hoyu ha'am b'mayim shesheisim ba'aretz mechalin shorab. They would sprinkle so much water that the water would be like all on the floor, and people would actually slip from that water because there was so much water being sprinkled there. And v'dersen eisam, and they would step on that water, and then v'nichnasen lemigdash, v'lehoyu cheshen lehem shem psulim. They were never choshish that maybe the mayim is psulim, and maybe there's a problem of them going into the mikdash. They always assumed that if there's the chalin shorabim, that's the place where they sprinkled and everything was fine. Now the addition of v'dersen eisam, in other words, we assumed that they became tor, and therefore all the water that was lying on the floor was considered water shenasis mitzvasam, and therefore they're not matami. In other words, if there would have been a chash that the water was not kosher, so first there would have been a problem, maybe they're not tor. And then there would be another problem, because when they're deirs on this water, so the water was mayim psulim, and memela you become tami letruma, and kolshkin you become tami legabi, you're not able to go into the mikdash. L'chura, it's like mamish a kalvachemer. If he was a tummy mess, and he's not worrying that he didn't become uis tummy mess because he's assuming the mayim are kosher. So obviously, if he's assuming the mayim is kosher, that he became uis tummy mess, so he certainly is going to assume that the mayim is kosher, and he's not becoming tummy of the din derabanan of touching mayim which are puzzle, and which is a din derabanan that you become tummy letruma, and al derazeh you tummy lemigdash. L'chura, you have to understand that l'chura it's a kalvachemer. Because if you're assuming that it's kosher legabi this din, that you could go into the mikdash and you're tor, you became tor, so certainly you're assuming it's kosher legabi the din that you didn't become tummy, which that din tum is only a din derabon. Halacha test. Now we learned before that only a kibetza is a ba'oichlin is matami. Now we also know that an ezev, which is being used lechatos, has to be tor lechatos. It has to be tor lechatos. If it's tummy lechatos, so it can't be used. If it can't be used. Now, what happens when you take the azev and you put it into the water? So the question is, if this azev is considered tami lechatos, so now it could be matami the water. But when could it be matami the water? It could only be matami the water if the azev was a kabetza. If it wasn't a kabetza, so it wasn't matami the water. But on the other hand, since this azev is tami, it can be used as an azev for sprinkling. So if you have an azev which is tami, so if it's a kabetza, so then it was matami the water that it touches, and all that water becomes puzzle for mechatas. If it didn't have a kabetza, so then the water that it touches doesn't become tummy lechatas. But on the other end, you can't use this azev for the sprinkling, because lepel you have to use an azev tor. Halachates hamaze be'azev hatami lechatas. Person went ahead and he sprinkled with an azev which was tummy lechatas. Is in yesh bekibetza, if this azev had a kabetza, so mele basically by dipping it into the water became tummy zamayim sulim, vazoyosip sulim. However, ein bekibetza, if the azev didn't have a betza, is hamayim ksherim. The fact that you dipped it in didn't make the water puzzle. Vazoyosip sulim. The hazoy is puzzle, because the hazoy is puzzle. Now the azev zeh, this azev is mitami chaveri, v'chaveri lechaveri, afilo heimeya, sheimena lechatus. So obviously, only we're talking about if it's an azev of a kabetza. If it's an azev kabetza, and it could be matami, so it could be matami the next azev, and the next azev another azev, or whatever. You know, they all become tummy, because lepel by chatas is ein. Halacha yud. Hamagbia keli shehuz olav. You have a keli which they sprinkled on it the main nida, and to become tor, and now there's still a lot of water on it. There's water which is kedei azoya, magbia keli, shuhuz olav, varei olav mayim kedei azoya. There's enough water over there which could be used for sprinkling. So the din is tor. The person that's magbia is tor, even though main nida is metami b'masa, shamayim shasim mitzvos, main metami k'nisha b'yarnu. Because since this water was sprinkled on this keli, so that water goes into a gather of mayim shasim mitzvosim, and therefore it's not metami k'nisha b'yarnu. Berich Rachmona de Sayon. This is the end of Hilchas Paradum.